The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow across the still lake, when David and his daughter, Lily, loaded their fishing gear into the old rowboat. It was supposed to be a perfect day, just the two of them, like so many times before, laughing and casting lines under the wide-open sky. David, a single dad with a quiet smile and a heart full of love for his 12-year-old, had promised Lily a morning of fishing and storytelling, the kind of day that would stick with her forever. She was his whole world, a bright spark with a curious mind and a giggle that could light up even the gloomiest moments. They pushed off from the shore, the water lapping gently against the boat, and waved to a couple of early risers on the dock. No one could have known that would be the last time anyone saw them. Days turned into weeks, and the small town of Willow Creek buzzed with questions. What happened to David and Lily? Where did they go? Search parties scoured the lake, the woods, every trail and cove, but found nothing, no boat, no gear, no trace. It was as if the lake had swallowed them whole. Then, months later, a hunter stumbled across something in the dense forest miles from the water, a battered, mud-streaked camera half buried under a pile of leaves. Its memory card was still intact, and what it held sent chills through everyone who saw it. What was on that camera? What secrets did it capture from that fateful day? And why was it so far from the lake? Hold that thought, because there's another story I need to tell you, a story that seems unrelated but ties into this mystery in ways you won't believe. It's about a kid named Marcus, a black teenager with a heart bigger than most, who made a choice one day that changed his life forever. Marcus was just 16, riding the city bus home from school, his backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds blasting his favorite playlist. The bus was packed, standing room only, and the air was thick with the hum of conversations and the occasional squeak of brakes. Marcus was minding his own business, scrolling through his phone, when he noticed a pregnant woman struggling to stay balanced as the bus lurched forward. She was pale, her hand gripping the pole tightly, and no one seemed to care. Without a second thought, Marcus stood up, tapped her shoulder, and offered his seat. "Here, you need this more than me," he said with a shy smile. The woman, whose name he'd later learn was Claire, looked surprised but grateful as she sank into the seat. They didn't talk much, just a quick thank you and a nod, but as Marcus got off at his stop, Claire slipped a folded note into his hand. "Read it later," she whispered, her eyes holding something he couldn't quite place. Marcus tucked the note in his pocket, figuring it was just a kind gesture, maybe a thank you. But when he opened it that night, his jaw dropped. The words scrawled on that piece of paper weren't just a thank you, they were a promise, a connection, a life-altering moment that would pull Marcus into a web of events he never could have imagined. What did the note say? And how does it connect to David and Lily's disappearance? Stay with me, because these two stories, separated by miles and moments, are about to collide in a way that'll leave you speechless. Picture Willow Creek, a sleepy little town where everyone knows everyone, and the lake is the heart of it all. David and Lily weren't just locals, they were the kind of people who made the place feel like home. David, with his flannel shirts and easy laugh, was the guy who'd fix your car or share his catch if you were short on dinner. Lily was his shadow, always asking questions, always sketching the world around her in a little notebook she carried everywhere. That morning, they'd packed sandwiches, a thermos of coffee for David, and a juice box for Lily. They'd joked about catching the biggest fish yet, maybe even one to brag about at the diner. The lake was calm, the kind of calm that makes you feel like nothing bad could ever happen. But something did. By noon, when David's buddy Tom stopped by the dock to check on them, the boat was gone. No sign of it on the water, no ripples, nothing. Tom figured they'd rowed to the far side, maybe to explore the coves, but when evening came and they still hadn't returned, panic set in. The town rallied volunteers, police, even divers, but the lake gave up no clues. Days bled into weeks, and the questions grew darker. Did the boat capsize? Did they wander into the woods and get lost? Or was there something else, something no one wanted to say out loud? The camera, found months later by that hunter, was the first real lead. It wasn't just any camera, it was David's, the one Lily loved to use to snap pictures of birds and sunsets. The footage on it wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't just a record of their day, it was a puzzle, a glimpse into something unsettling, something that made the sheriff's hands shake as he watched it. Now, Let's jump back to Marcus. He was just a kid trying to get through high school, juggling homework and a part-time job at the corner store. He wasn't looking for trouble, wasn't looking for anything really, just trying to do the right thing. That moment on the bus, that split-second decision to give up his seat, felt like nothing at the time. But Claire's note wasn't just a note. It was a key, a door to something bigger, something that would pull Marcus out of his quiet life and into a story he didn't ask to be part of. Claire wasn't just a random stranger, either. She had her own secrets, her own reasons for being on that bus, and the note she gave Marcus was her way of reaching out, of passing on something she couldn't carry alone. When Marcus read it, he didn't know what to make of it. It wasn't money or a gift card, it was a message, cryptic and urgent, with instructions that made his heart race. Find the truth, it said, followed by a name and a place that meant nothing to him at the time. But the name? It was David's. And the place? Willow Creek. Marcus had never heard of either, but something about the note made him feel like he couldn't ignore it. Was it a coincidence? Or was there a reason Claire chose him, a reason that went beyond a kind gesture on a crowded bus? The lake in Willow Creek isn't just a lake, it's a place where stories are born, where people come to forget their troubles or find themselves. For David and Lily, it was their sanctuary, a place where they could just be together. But that day, something went wrong. The camera's footage didn't show everything, but it showed enough. There were clips of Lily laughing, pointing at a fish jumping in the water. There were shots of David rowing, his face relaxed, the sun glinting off his sunglasses. But then the footage changed. The clips got shaky, the audio muffled, like something had startled them. There was a moment, just a few seconds, where Lily's voice sounded different, scared maybe, saying, "Dad, what's that?" The screen went dark after that, but not before catching a glimpse of something in the distance, something that didn't belong. Was it another boat? A person? Or something else entirely? The hunter who found the camera didn't stick around to find out. He turned it over to the sheriff, and word spread fast. People in Willow Creek started whispering about old legends, about the lake and the woods and things that didn't add up. Some said David and Lily ran into trouble, maybe a storm, maybe an accident. Others thought it was something darker, something tied to the land itself. Marcus, meanwhile, was wrestling with the note. He wasn't a detective, wasn't some hero from a movie. He was just a kid, but the words "find the truth" stuck with him. He started searching online, piecing together what he could about David and Willow Creek. The more he learned, the more he felt like the note wasn't random. David and Lily's disappearance was all over the local news archives, articles about the search, the lake, the camera. Marcus didn't know why Claire had pointed him to this, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to do something. He told his mom about the note, but she brushed it off, saying he shouldn't get mixed up in strangers' problems. His best friend, Jaden, was more curious, pushing him to dig deeper. "What if it's real, man? What if you're supposed to find something?" Jaden said, half joking but half serious. Marcus didn't have answers, but he had questions, and those questions were starting to pull him toward Willow Creek, toward a place he'd never been and a mystery he didn't understand. Back at the lake, the camera's discovery reopened old wounds. David's sister, Sarah, had never given up hope, even when everyone else had moved on. She'd spent months walking the trails, calling Lily's name, praying for a miracle. When the sheriff showed her the footage, she broke down. It wasn't just seeing her brother and niece again, it was the fear in Lily's voice, the way the video cut off. Sarah begged the police to search the woods again, to follow whatever trail the camera might point to. But the woods around Willow Creek are vast, tangled, easy to get lost in. The hunter who found the camera said he'd been miles from the lake, in a part of the forest most people avoided. He didn't say why, but his eyes told a story of their own. Rumors started swirling about strange lights in the woods, about sounds that didn't make sense, about things seen and then forgotten. The town was on edge, and the camera only made it worse. What had David and Lily seen? What had they found out there? And why was the camera so far from where they'd been? Marcus's life was changing, too. The note was like a pebble in his shoe, impossible to ignore. He started dreaming about the lake, about a girl's voice calling for help. He didn't tell anyone about the dreams, they felt too private, too weird, but they pushed him to act. He saved up for a bus ticket to Willow Creek, telling his mom it was just a weekend trip with friends. Jaden came along, mostly because he didn't trust Marcus to go alone. The closer they got to the town, the heavier the air felt, like the weight of something unspoken. Willow Creek wasn't just a dot on a map, it was a place holding its breath, waiting for answers. Marcus didn't know what he'd find, didn't know if the note was even real, but he was here now, standing at the edge of a story that wasn't his but felt like it was. The lake stretched out before him, calm and quiet, hiding whatever it knew. And somewhere, maybe in the woods, maybe closer than he thought, was the truth about David and Lily and the note that had brought him here. What's on that camera? What's in the note? And how do these two stories, one of a father and daughter lost, one of a boy pulled into a mystery, fit together? I'm not going to tell you just yet. You'll have to stick around, because the answers are coming, and they're bigger than you think. For now, imagine the lake at dusk, the water still, the woods silent. Imagine a camera, its lens catching something it shouldn't. And imagine a kid, holding a note that could change everything, wondering what he's gotten himself into. This is where it starts. This is where the truth begins to unravel. Marcus stood at the edge of Willow Creek's lake, the water so still it looked like a mirror reflecting the grey sky. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, and for a moment, he felt like he'd stepped into one of his dreams. Jaden was next to him, kicking a pebble into the water, the ripples breaking the silence. This place is creepy, man, Jaden muttered, glancing at the dense woods that circled the lake. Marcus didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the horizon where David and Lily's boat had last been seen. The note in his pocket felt heavier now, like it was pulling him toward something he wasn't ready for. He'd read it a dozen times on the bus ride over, the words "find the truth" burned into his mind, along with David's name and this place, Willow Creek. Why him? Why a kid from the city who'd never even been fishing? Claire's face flashed in his memory, her tired eyes and the way she'd pressed the note into his hand. There was something about her, something desperate, like she'd been waiting for someone like him to come along. But who was she, and how did she know David? Marcus shook his head, trying to focus. He was here now, and there was no turning back. The town itself was small, just a handful of streets with a diner, a gas station, and a general store that looked like it hadn't changed in decades. Marcus and Jaden had checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind with flickering neon signs and creaky beds. The woman at the front desk, Mrs. Harper, had eyed them curiously when they asked about the lake. "You boys here for the fishing," she'd said, her voice friendly but guarded. Marcus had hesitated, then mentioned David and Lily, watching her face change. Her smile faded, and she busied herself with some papers. "That's a sad story," she'd said softly. "Best not to stir it up." But Marcus could tell she knew more than she was letting on. Everyone in Willow Creek did. The disappearance wasn't just news, it was a wound, still raw, still bleeding. People didn't talk about it openly, but you could feel it in the way they glanced at the lake, the way they lowered their voices when they passed the dock. Marcus had overheard a couple of old men at the diner talking about the camera, their words hushed, like they were afraid someone or something might hear. Back at the lake, Jaden pulled out his phone, snapping a picture of the water. "You think it's true? The stuff about the camera?" he asked, his voice low. Marcus shrugged, but his stomach twisted. He'd read about the footage online, the shaky clips of Lily's voice, the way it cut off. The articles didn't say much, just enough to keep people guessing. Some blogs called it a hoax, others said it was proof of something sinister. Marcus didn't know what to believe, but the note made it real. He pulled it out again, unfolding the worn paper. Below "Find the Truth" and David's name, there was an address, 132, Maple Lane, right here in Willow Creek. He hadn't told Jaden about it yet, wasn't sure why. Maybe because it felt too personal, like a secret he was meant to keep. "We should check out the town," he said instead, tucking the note away. "See if anyone knows anything." Jaden raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. They started walking, the gravel crunching under their sneakers, the woods looming on one side, the lake on the other. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. 132, Maple Lane was on the other side of town, a quiet street lined with old houses and overgrown yards. Marcus had looked it up on his phone. It was David's address, the house he and Lily had lived in before they vanished. He didn't know what he'd find there, didn't even know if he'd have the guts to knock on the door, but the note had led him this far. As they walked, Jaden filled the silence with questions. What if this Claire lady's messing with you? Like, what if it's a prank? Marcus didn't have an answer. He'd thought about that, too, but something about the note felt too real, too urgent. Besides, Claire hadn't seemed like the prank type. She'd looked scared, like she was carrying a weight she couldn't put down. Marcus wondered if she'd known David, if she'd been part of his life before the lake took him. Or maybe she'd found something, seen something, that made her write the note. The questions piled up, each one heavier than the last. They passed the diner again, and Marcus noticed a woman watching them from the window. She was older, with grey hair pulled into a bun, and her eyes followed them like she was trying to figure them out. Marcus nudged Jaden, nodding toward her. Think she knows something? Jaden smirked. Only one way to find out. They pushed open the door, the bell jingling above them, and slid into a booth. The woman, who turned out to be the diner's owner, Ellie, came over with a pot of coffee and a wary smile. You boys aren't from around here, she said, pouring them water instead. Marcus took a deep breath and decided to be straight with her. We're here about David and Lily, he said, watching her face. Ellie's smile faltered, just for a second, but she recovered fast. Lot of folks come through asking about them, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Nothing new to tell. Sad what happened. But Marcus caught the way her eyes flicked to the window, toward the lake, like she was checking for something. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. What about the camera? The one the hunter found? Ellie's hand froze on the table, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she sighed, like she was letting out a breath she'd been holding for months. That camera's got people talking, but it's not answers. It's just more questions. She glanced around, making sure no one was listening. The footage, it's strange. Not right. But you didn't hear that from me. Before Marcus could ask more, she turned and headed back to the kitchen, leaving him and Jaden staring at each other. Strange how? Jaden whispered, but Marcus didn't have a clue. All he knew was that Ellie was scared, and that made the knot in his stomach tighten. The camera wasn't just a clue, it was a warning, maybe, or a piece of something bigger. And the note? It was his only way in. As they left the diner, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange and red. The lake looked different now, less like a mirror and more like a shadow, hiding something just below the surface. Marcus thought about Lily, her voice on the footage, the fear in those few words. Dad, what's that? He thought about David, rowing his daughter across the water, not knowing it was the last time. And he thought about Claire, a stranger who'd seen something in him, something that made her trust him with this. 132, Maple Lane was out there, waiting. The woods were out there, too, with their secrets and their silence. Marcus didn't know where this was going, but he knew he couldn't stop now. The truth was close, closer than he realized, and it was pulling him in, just like it had pulled David and Lily. The sky was turning a deep purple as Marcus and Jaden made their way toward 132, Maple Lane, the address from Claire's note. The streets of Willow Creek were quiet, the kind of quiet that made every rustle in the bushes feel like a warning. Marcus's sneakers scuffed against the cracked sidewalk, his mind racing with what Ellie had said at the diner. Strange. Not right. Her words about the camera footage echoed, each one adding weight to the note in his pocket. Jaden was quieter than usual, his usual jokes replaced by a nervous energy. You sure about this, man? He asked, glancing at the darkening woods that edged the town. What if this address is, like, a dead end? Or worse? Marcus didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure about anything, but the note felt like a thread he had to follow, no matter where it led. David and Lily's disappearance wasn't just a story anymore, it was a puzzle, and Marcus was tangled in it, whether he liked it or not. The house at 132, Maple Lane was smaller than Marcus had expected, a faded blue cottage with peeling paint and a sagging porch. The yard was overgrown, weeds choking what used to be a flowerbed, and the windows were dark, like no one had lived there in months. Which made sense, David and Lily hadn't come back, and no one else had claimed the place. Marcus hesitated at the gate, his hand hovering over the rusty latch. "What are we even looking for?" Jaden whispered, his voice barely audible. Marcus didn't know, but the note had brought him here, and Claire's words, "Find the truth," felt like a command he couldn't ignore. He pushed the gate open, the hinges creaking loud enough to make them both flinch. The porch steps groaned under their weight, and Marcus's heart pounded as he knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, harder, but the house stayed silent. Jaden peered through a window, cupping his hands against the glass. "Looks empty," he said, but his voice shook. Marcus tried the doorknob, half expecting it to be locked, but it turned with a soft click. The door swung open, revealing a dim hallway that smelled of dust and time. Inside, the house felt frozen, like it was waiting for David and Lily to walk through the door. A coat rack stood by the entrance, holding a small pink jacket, Lily's, probably. Marcus's throat tightened at the sight. The living room was cluttered but neat, with a couch covered in a faded quilt and a coffee table stacked with fishing magazines. A framed photo on the mantel showed David and Lily at the lake, smiling, their arms around each other. Marcus picked it up, his fingers brushing the glass. They looked happy, like nothing could touch them. So what happened? What changed that day on the lake? Jaden was poking around the kitchen, opening drawers, but Marcus stayed in the living room, drawn to a shelf of books and trinkets. Among them was a small notebook, its cover decorated with stickers of fish and stars. Lily's. He opened it, flipping through pages of sketches, birds, trees, the lake at sunset. But toward the back, the drawings changed. They were rougher, darker, with jagged lines and shapes that didn't make sense. One page had a single sentence scrawled in shaky handwriting, "It watches from the woods." Marcus's skin prickled. He showed it to Jaden, who read it and muttered, "What the hell?" They didn't have time to process it. A noise came from outside, a low, deliberate crunch, like footsteps on gravel. Marcus froze, clutching the notebook. Jaden's eyes went wide, and he motioned toward the back door. "Someone's out there," he hissed. They crept to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. A shadow moved in the yard, too tall to be an animal, too quick to be random. Marcus's pulse hammered in his ears. Was it the hunter who'd found the camera? Someone from town? Or something else? The shadow paused, then vanished into the trees, leaving only the rustle of leaves. Marcus wanted to run, but his feet felt glued to the floor. "We gotta go," Jaden said, already heading for the front door. Marcus shoved the notebook into his backpack, his hands shaking, and followed. They slipped out of the house, closing the door as quietly as they could, and hurried back toward the motel, glancing over their shoulders the whole way. The woods seemed alive now, every snap of a twig a threat. Back at the motel, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed, Lily's notebook open in front of him. Jaden was sprawled on the other bed, scrolling through his phone, trying to act calm but failing. "You think that was just some guy out there?" he asked, not looking up. Marcus didn't answer. He was stuck on Lily's words, "It watches from the woods." It matched the fear in her voice on the camera footage, the way she'd said, "Dad, what's that?" He thought about the lake, the way it hid things, and the woods, so thick they could swallow you whole. What had Lily seen? What had scared her enough to draw those shapes, to write that sentence? And how did Claire fit into this? Marcus pulled out the note again, rereading it under the dim motel lamp. The address had led them to David's house, but the truth was still out of reach. He wondered if Claire had been here, if she'd stood in that same living room, looking for answers. Maybe she'd known David and Lily, maybe she'd been part of their lives. Or maybe she'd found something about the lake, the woods, the thing that watched. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah, David's sister, was sitting in her own small apartment, the camera footage playing on her laptop. She'd watched it 100 times, pausing at every frame, searching for clues. The police had given her a copy, mostly to keep her quiet, but they'd warned her not to share it. "It's evidence," they'd said, but Sarah knew they were stalling. The footage was grainy, the audio patchy, but it was all she had. There was Lily, laughing, pointing at the water. There was David, rowing, his voice calm as he teased her about her fishing skills. And then that moment, the shake of the camera, Lily's voice trembling, the glimpse of something in the distance. Sarah leaned closer, her eyes burning. It wasn't a boat, wasn't a person. It was something else, a shape that didn't fit. She rewound, played it again, her heart racing. The sheriff had brushed it off, saying it was probably a deer or a trick of the light, but Sarah didn't buy it. She'd grown up by the lake, knew its moods, its secrets. Whatever was in that footage wasn't normal. And now, with 2 kids poking around town, asking questions, she felt a new kind of fear. Were they just curious, or did they know something? Sarah didn't trust easily, not after months of dead ends, but she needed to find out. Marcus didn't know about Sarah, didn't know she was watching the same clues he was chasing. All he knew was that the notebook and the note were pulling him deeper, and the shadow in the yard had made it personal. He lay back, staring at the motel ceiling, the words "it watches from the woods" looping in his mind. The lake was out there, silent and waiting. The camera was out there, too, its secrets locked in those final frames. And somewhere, maybe closer than he thought, was the truth Claire had sent him to find. But what if the truth wasn't just about David and Lily? What if it was bigger, darker, something that could change everything? Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of it all pressing down, and wondered what he'd find tomorrow and what might find him. The morning sun barely broke through the thick fog that hung over Willow Creek, wrapping the lake and woods in a ghostly haze. Marcus woke with a jolt, his dreams filled with Lily's voice and that shadowy figure from David's yard. The motel room was stuffy, the air heavy with the weight of what they'd found and what they hadn't. Jaden was already up, sitting cross-legged on his bed, scrolling through his phone. "You see this?" he said, holding up a local news article he'd found online. It was about the camera, but not the footage itself, just a vague mention of new evidence in the David and Lily case. The comments below were wild. Some people swore the lake was cursed, others said the woods hid things no one should see. Marcus rubbed his eyes, Lily's notebook still open on the nightstand, the words "it watches from the woods" staring back at him. He didn't know what it was, but the shadow from last night made him believe it was real. The note from Claire burned in his pocket, its cryptic message, "Find the truth," feeling more like a warning now. Today, they were going back to the lake, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was waiting there was ready for them. They grabbed breakfast at the diner, but the mood was different. Ellie, the owner, avoided their table, sending a younger waitress instead. Marcus caught her glancing at them from the kitchen, her face tight with worry. Word must have spread about 2 kids snooping around David's house. The locals weren't hostile, but their stares were heavy, like Marcus and Jaden were stirring up something better left alone. Over greasy eggs and coffee, Jaden leaned in. "We need a plan, man. We can't just wander around hoping for answers." Marcus nodded, pulling out Lily's notebook. He'd found something new last night, tucked between the pages, a folded map of the lake, hand-drawn, with a red X marked deep in the woods, miles from the water. It wasn't labeled, but it was close to where the hunter had found the camera. "We start here," Marcus said, tapping the X. Jaden's eyes widened. "You're serious? That's, like, middle-of-nowhere stuff. What if we get lost?" Marcus didn't have a good answer, but the map felt like a sign, a piece of Lily's puzzle calling them forward. He didn't say it out loud, but he felt like she was guiding him, like her sketches and words were meant for him to find. The walk to the lake was tense, the fog thickening as they got closer. The dock was empty, the water barely visible through the mist. Marcus's sneakers sank into the muddy shore, and every sound, every snap of a twig, every ripple in the water made his heart race. Jaden carried a flashlight, even though it was daytime, and Marcus clutched the map, checking it against the trail signs. The path into the woods was narrow, overgrown, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking. As they stepped into the trees, the air grew colder, the fog curling around the trunks like fingers. Marcus thought about the camera footage, the way Lily's voice had trembled, the shape in the distance that didn't belong. He thought about Claire, too, wondering if she'd walked this same path, if she'd seen what Lily had seen. The note had brought him here, but it didn't tell him what to do next, and that scared him more than he'd admit. Jaden was quiet, his usual chatter replaced by quick glances over his shoulder. "You feel that?" he whispered. "Like, someone's out there." Marcus nodded. He felt it too, a prickling on the back of his neck, like eyes in the dark. The trail wound deeper, the trees closing in, their branches blotting out what little light there was. Marcus kept the map out, but the landmarks were hard to spot in the fog. A fallen log here, a stream there, everything looked wrong, like the woods were shifting around them. They'd been walking for over an hour when they found it, a clearing, just like the one on Lily's map, with the red X. It was smaller than Marcus expected, ringed by tall pines, the ground covered in pine needles and leaves. In the center was a pile of rocks, stacked deliberately, like a marker. Marcus's stomach dropped. "This is it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jaden shone the flashlight, even though the fog made it useless. "What's with the rocks?" he asked, stepping closer. Marcus knelt beside them, his hands shaking as he brushed away the leaves. Underneath, carved into one of the stones, was a symbol, a rough circle with lines spiking out, like the ones in Lily's notebook. It wasn't just a drawing, it was deep, etched with purpose. "She was here," Marcus said, his voice catching. "Lily. This is her mark." Before Jaden could respond, a sound cut through the fog, a low, guttural hum, like something vibrating deep in the earth. It wasn't loud, but it was close, and it made the air feel heavier. Marcus froze, his hand still on the stone. Jaden's flashlight flicked toward the trees, the beam shaking. "What was that?" he hissed. The hum stopped, replaced by silence so thick it pressed against Marcus's chest. Then, from the edge of the clearing, came another sound, footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching through the leaves. Marcus's heart slammed against his ribs. He grabbed Jaden's arm, pulling him back toward the rocks. "Hide," he whispered, but there was nowhere to go. The footsteps circled the clearing, staying just out of sight, hidden by the fog. Marcus thought of the shadow at David's house, the way it had moved, too fast, too quiet. Was it the same thing? The thing Lily had seen? The thing that watched from the woods? He clutched the notebook, his fingers digging into the cover, and whispered a prayer he hadn't said since he was a kid. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, Marcus thought it was over. Then a voice broke the silence, a woman's voice, sharp and urgent. "You shouldn't be here." It came from the trees, close enough to make Marcus jump. Jaden swung the flashlight, but the beam caught only fog and branches. "Who's there?" Marcus called, his voice cracking. No answer, just the rustle of leaves, like whoever it was had slipped away. But the words lingered, heavy with warning. Was it Claire? Sarah? Someone else? Marcus's mind raced, piecing together the clues, the note, the footage, Lily's drawings, the symbol on the stone. They were close, so close to something, but every step forward felt like a step toward danger. The fog seemed to tighten around them, the woods alive with whispers he couldn't quite hear. Jaden grabbed his shoulder. "We gotta move, man. Now." But Marcus couldn't tear his eyes from the rocks, from the symbol that tied Lily to this place. Whatever had happened to her and David, it started here or ended here. And now he was part of it. The hum started again, louder this time, vibrating through the ground, up through Marcus's feet. The fog swirled, and for a split second, he saw it, a shape in the mist, tall and wrong, just beyond the trees. It wasn't a person, wasn't an animal. It was something else, something that made his blood run cold. Jaden saw it too, his flashlight dropping to the ground. "Marcus," he choked out, but Marcus couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The shape didn't come closer, but it didn't leave either. It watched, just like Lily had said. The truth was here, in this clearing, in the symbol, in the thing that waited in the fog. But what was it? And what did it want? Marcus's hand tightened around the notebook, Claire's note crinkling in his pocket, and he knew they were standing on the edge of something they might not come back from. The shape in the fog didn't move, but its presence pressed against Marcus like a weight, pinning him to the spot. The hum pulsed through the clearing, low and relentless, making the air feel alive, electric. Jaden's flashlight lay forgotten on the ground, its beam cutting uselessly through the mist. Marcus's hand gripped Lily's notebook so tightly his knuckles ached, the symbol on the rock, her symbol, burning in his mind. The woman's voice from the trees, sharp and warning, echoed in his ears, "You shouldn't be here." His heart pounded, torn between running and staying, between fear and the need to know what happened to David and Lily. The shape in the fog shifted, just enough to make Marcus's breath catch, and then it was gone, swallowed by the mist as if it had never been there. But it had been there. He'd seen it. Jayden had seen it. And whatever it wasn't done with them. The fog seemed to thicken, the woods closing in, and Marcus knew they were running out of time. Jayden grabbed his arm, his voice a shaky whisper. "Marcus, we gotta go. Now." But Marcus couldn't move, not yet. The symbol on the rock, the map, the notebook, it all pointed to this clearing, to this moment. Claire's note had led him here, and Lily's words, "It watches from the woods," felt like a plea, a message meant for him. He knelt by the rocks again, his hands trembling as he pushed aside more leaves. There, beneath the pile, was something else, a small metal box, rusted but intact, half buried in the dirt. It wasn't locked, but it was heavy, like it held more than just objects. Marcus pried it open, the hinges squeaking, and inside found a stack of papers, a few photos, and a key. The photos were of David and Lily, but not the happy kind from their living room. These were different, blurry, taken at night, showing the lake from a distance, with strange lights flickering in the water. The papers were notes, written in David's handwriting, filled with words like patterns, signals, and "not alone." One sentence stood out, underlined twice: "The lake isn't what it seems." Marcus's stomach twisted. What had David found? What had he and Lily stumbled into? Before he could read more, the hum surged, louder, sharper, like a scream trapped in the earth. Jayden yanked him to his feet, the box nearly slipping from Marcus's hands. "Move," he shouted, and this time Marcus listened. They stumbled out of the clearing, the fog swirling around them, the footsteps from before echoing again, closer now, faster. Marcus shoved the box into his backpack, the key clutched in his fist, and ran, Jayden right behind him. The trail was a blur, branches snapping at their faces, the map useless in the chaos. The woods felt alive, the trees leaning in, the fog hiding whatever was chasing them. Marcus's lungs burned, his mind racing with questions. The box, the photos, the key, what did they mean? Was this what Claire wanted him to find? And the shape in the fog, was it tied to the lights in David's photos, to the thing Lily had drawn in her notebook? The footsteps grew louder, deliberate, like they were being herded, and Marcus realized with a sickening jolt that they weren't alone. They burst out of the woods near the lake, the fog thinner here but still heavy, the water a dark mirror under the grey sky. Marcus's legs shook as he stopped, gasping for air, the key biting into his palm. Jayden doubled over, hands on his knees, but his eyes were wide, scanning the trees. "What was that, man? What the hell was that?" he panted. Marcus didn't have an answer, but the box in his backpack felt like a bomb, ready to explode with secrets. He was about to pull it out when a figure stepped out of the fog, not from the woods but from the direction of the dock. It was Sarah, David's sister, her face pale and her eyes sharp with something between fear and anger. "What are you doing out here?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the silence. Marcus froze, the key still in his hand, the box weighing down his shoulders. Sarah's gaze flicked to his backpack, then back to his face, and he saw it: recognition, suspicion, maybe even dread. "You found something," she said, not a question. "Show me." Marcus hesitated, his instincts screaming to keep the box hidden, but Sarah's intensity made him pause. She wasn't just curious, she was desperate, like she'd been chasing the same truth he was. "How'd you know we were here?" Jayden asked, stepping between them, his voice shaky but defiant. Sarah didn't flinch. "I've been watching the lake since they disappeared," she said. "I saw you at the diner, heard you asking about the camera. And now you're out here, in the woods, where no one goes. You're not tourists." Her eyes beforehand, Marcus swallowed hard, glancing at Jayden, who nodded slightly, giving him the okay to keep going. "We're just trying to figure out what happened to David and Lily," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still pumping through him. Sarah's eyes softened, just for a second, but then hardened again. "You don't know what you're messing with," she said, her voice low. "That camera, those woods, they're not just a story. There's something out there, something that took my brother and my niece." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. She knew something, maybe more than he did, but before he could ask, A new sound cut through the fog, a low, mechanical whine, coming from the lake. It wasn't the hum from the clearing, it was different, artificial, like a motor or a drone. Sarah's head snapped toward the water, her face draining of color. "They're here," she whispered, and Marcus's blood ran cold. The whine grew louder, and through the fog, Marcus saw it, lights, not like the ones in David's photos, but sharp, focused, cutting across the water. A boat, small and sleek, emerged from the mist, its hull unmarked, its occupants hidden by the glare. Jaden grabbed Marcus's arm, his voice urgent. "Who's that?" Marcus didn't know, but the key in his hand felt heavier, the box in his backpack a target. Sarah took a step back, her eyes darting between the boat and the woods, like she was trapped. "They've been watching," she said, her voice barely audible. "Ever since David started asking questions. They don't want anyone finding out." Marcus's mind reeled. Who were they? The people on the boat? The shadow in the woods? Or something else entirely? The lights from the boat swept closer, pinning them in their glare, and Marcus realized with a sickening twist that this wasn't just about David and Lily anymore. It was about the lake, the woods, the secrets David had uncovered, and now, the secrets Marcus held in his hands. The boat slowed, its engine idling, and a voice called out, cold and commanding. "Drop the bag and step away." Marcus's heart stopped. The box, the key, the truth, it was all in his backpack, and they wanted it. But who were they? And what were they hiding in the fog, in the lake, in the woods that watched? The boat's lights pinned Marcus, Jaden, and Sarah to the shore, the mechanical whine of its engine cutting through the fog like a blade. The voice from the boat, cold, commanding, echoed over the water. "Drop the bag and step away." Marcus's heart pounded, the metal box in his backpack feeling like a lead weight, the key still clenched in his fist. Lily's notebook, David's photos, the cryptic notes about the lake, it was all in there, the truth Claire had sent him to find. The fog swirled around them, the lake a dark void, and the woods behind them rustled with unseen threats. Sarah's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but she stood her ground, whispering, "Don't give it to them." Jaden's hand hovered near Marcus's arm, ready to run or fight, though neither seemed possible. The boat edged closer, its hull sleek and unmarked, and Marcus saw two figures on board, their faces hidden by shadows. They weren't just a rumor, they were real, and they were here for whatever David and Lily had uncovered. Marcus's mind raced, piecing together the clues, the camera footage, the symbol in the clearing, the lights in the water. The lake wasn't just a lake, and the truth was bigger than he'd ever imagined. "You don't know what you're holding," the voice from the boat called again, sharper now, impatient. "Hand it over, and you walk away." Marcus's grip on the key tightened. He thought of Lily's voice on the footage, scared and small, saying, "Dad, what's that?" He thought of David's notes, the underlined words, "The lake isn't what it seems." And he thought of Claire, her tired eyes as she slipped him the note, trusting a kid she didn't know to finish what she couldn't. He glanced at Sarah, who shook her head slightly, her lips pressed tight. Jaden's voice was a hiss in his ear, "Man, what do we do?" Marcus didn't have a plan, but he knew one thing, he wasn't giving up the box. Not after everything. "No," he said, his voice louder than he expected, carrying over the water. "You tell me what happened to David and Lily first." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the lap of waves against the shore. The figures on the boat shifted, and Marcus swore he heard one of them mutter something, like they hadn't expected resistance. The boat's engine revved, and it surged forward, closing the gap to the shore. Marcus's heart leapt into his throat as one of the figures stepped onto the dock, a tall man in a dark jacket, his face still obscured by the fog. He held no weapon, but his presence was threat enough. "You're making a mistake, kid," he said, his voice low, almost regretful. "That box belongs to us. Always has." Sarah stepped forward, her voice shaking but fierce. "It belonged to my brother. You took him. You took Lily. Where are they?" The man didn't answer, but his eyes flicked to the backpack, and Marcus saw it, greed, fear, something desperate. The second figure, still on the boat, called out, "Enough. Get it done." Marcus's blood ran cold. They weren't here to talk. They were here to take, and they didn't care what happened to him, Jaden, or Sarah. The man on the dock took a step closer, and Marcus backed up, his sneakers slipping on the muddy shore. The key in his hand felt like his only leverage, but he didn't even know what it unlocked. Then, from the woods, came a sound, a low, guttural hum, the same one from the clearing, but louder, angrier. The man froze, his head snapping toward the trees. The fog seemed to pulse, and Marcus saw it again, the shape, tall and wrong, moving just beyond the tree line. It wasn't human, wasn't anything he could name, and its presence made the air feel thick, electric. The man on the dock cursed under his breath, and the figure on the boat shouted, "Now, get the box." But the hum grew deafening, vibrating through the ground, and the shape in the woods stepped closer, its outline clearer now, jagged, shifting, like it didn't belong in this world. Marcus's knees buckled, but Sarah grabbed his arm, her voice urgent. "Run. Now." They bolted toward the trail, Jaden stumbling behind, the box slamming against Marcus's back. The man on the dock lunged, but the hum surged, and something, wind, force, something, knocked him to the ground. The boat's engine roared, but it didn't follow. The shape in the woods didn't chase them either, but Marcus felt its eyes, just like Lily had written, "It watches." They ran until their lungs burned, collapsing near the edge of town, the fog still clinging to their clothes. Marcus's hands shook as he pulled the box from his backpack, the key glinting in the dim light. Sarah knelt beside him, her breath ragged. "Open it," she said, her voice raw. "We need to know." Marcus fumbled with the key, fitting it into the box's rusty lock. It clicked, and the lid sprang open, revealing more than just papers and photos. There was a small device, like a recorder, and a single sheet of paper with a map, not Lily's, but David's, marked with coordinates and a single word, source. The recorder hummed when Marcus pressed play, and David's voice filled the air, calm but urgent. "If you're hearing this, you found it. The lake's a cover. They're hiding something, signals, tech, something not from here. Lily saw it. I saw it. Don't trust anyone." The recording cut off, but the truth hit like a punch. David and Lily hadn't just disappeared, they'd stumbled onto something massive, something someone was willing to kill to protect. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, like she'd known all along. "They're gone," she whispered, not a question. Marcus wanted to argue, to say there was hope, but the weight of David's words settled over him. The men on the boat, the shape in the woods, the lights in the lake, it was all connected, a secret bigger than Willow Creek, bigger than any of them. Jaden, still catching his breath, looked at Marcus. "What now, man? We can't just keep this." Marcus didn't know, but Claire's note flashed in his mind, "Find the truth." He'd found it, or part of it, but at what cost? They couldn't stay here, not with those men out there, not with that thing in the woods. He was about to speak when a new sound broke the silence, a soft chime from his phone. A text, from an unknown number. His hands went cold as he read it. "You have it. Bring it to me. Claire." His heart stopped. Claire was alive, and she was here, in Willow Creek, watching him. But the twist, the real twist, was the next line. "I'm not who you think." The fog seemed to close in again, the lake and woods silent, waiting, and Marcus realized the truth wasn't just in the box. It was in Claire, the woman who'd started this all, and whatever she was hiding was about to change everything. Marcus stared at the text on his phone, the words "I'm not who you think" glowing in the dim light. The fog around Willow Creek's lake seemed to hold its breath, the woods silent after the chaos of the boat, the shape, and David's recorded voice. The metal box sat open in the dirt, its contents, papers, photos, the recorder, the map spilling secrets about the lake that David and Lily had died for. Sarah's face was streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she clutched the recorder, David's last words echoing in her mind. Jaden stood close, his eyes darting between the phone and the trail back to town, like he expected the men from the boat to appear any second. Marcus's heart raced, Claire's message pulling him into a new layer of the mystery. She was here, in Willow Creek, and she wasn't just a stranger on a bus. Who was she? And what did she want with the box? The truth they'd fought for felt fragile, like it could slip away if they didn't act fast. Marcus typed a reply, his fingers shaking. "Where are you?" The response came instantly. "The diner. Now." He looked at Sarah and Jaden, their faces a mix of fear and determination, and knew they were in this together, all the way to the end. The walk back to town was tense, the fog thinning but the weight of the night pressing down. Marcus carried the box, the key now tucked in his pocket next to Claire's note. Sarah held the recorder, her steps steady despite the grief in her eyes. Jayden kept his phone out, recording a shaky video of their path, muttering, "Just in case we don't make it." The lake loomed to their left, its surface calm but heavy with secrets, signals, tech, something not from here, just like David had said. Marcus thought about Lily's notebook, her drawings of the woods, her words, "It watches." The shape in the fog hadn't followed them, but its presence lingered, a reminder that the lake and woods held more than human threats. As they reached the diner, its neon sign flickering through the mist, Marcus's stomach knotted. Claire was inside, waiting, and whatever she revealed would either tie this all together or unravel everything. Ellie, the diner's owner, was wiping down the counter when they walked in, her eyes widening at the sight of them, muddy, breathless, carrying a rusty box. The place was empty except for a woman in a corner booth, her back to the door, her hair tucked under a scarf. Marcus knew it was Claire before she turned around. Her face was the same as on the bus, tired, lined with worry, but her eyes were sharper now, focused, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "You found it," she said, her voice low, nodding at the box. Sarah stepped forward, her voice raw. "Who are you? And what do you know about my brother?" Claire's gaze softened, but she didn't flinch. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, and the words hit Sarah like a blow. "But David wasn't just your brother. He was my partner, my work partner." Marcus's jaw dropped. Claire wasn't just a random stranger. She was connected to David, to the lake, to whatever he'd uncovered. Claire gestured for them to sit, her hands steady despite the tension in the air. "I'm a researcher," she explained, keeping her voice quiet. "David and I were studying the lake, unexplained signals, energy spikes, things the government's been tracking for years. We thought it was just data at first, but then we found something else. Something alive, maybe. In the lake, in the woods." Marcus thought of the shape, the hum, the lights in David's photos. Claire's eyes flicked to the box. "David hid that when he realized they were after us. He took Lily fishing to keep her safe, but they saw too much. The camera caught it, proof of what's out there." Sarah's voice broke. "So they killed them?" Claire hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know. They vanished. The men on the boat, they're part of it, a cover-up. They've been watching Willow Creek, making sure no one digs too deep." Marcus's mind spun. The men, the shape, the signals, it was all real, and Claire had been running from it, just like David. He slid the box across the table. "What's in here? And why me?" Claire's fingers brushed the papers, her expression unreadable. "David trusted me to keep this safe. When I saw you on the bus, Marcus, I saw someone who'd do the right thing. I was scared, cornered. I needed someone outside all this." She opened the box, pulling out the map with the word source. "This leads to where the signals are strongest." David thought it was the key to understanding it, maybe stopping it. Jayden leaned in, his voice skeptical. "Stopping what?" "That thing in the woods." Claire's eyes darkened. "I don't know what it is. Neither did David. But it's tied to the lake, and it's not alone." Marcus thought of Lily's drawings, her fear, and felt a pang. She'd been a kid, like him, caught in something too big. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice steady now. "What do we do with this?" Claire looked at each of them, her face resolute. "We expose it. The recorder, the photos, the map, we get it out there, online, everywhere. They can't silence everyone." Marcus nodded, his fear giving way to purpose. He thought of Lily's notebook, her sketches a cry for help, and knew this was what Claire's note meant: find the truth. They spent the next hour in the diner, uploading David's recording and photos to Jayden's phone, posting them on every platform they could think of: Willow Creek mystery, lake signals, unexplained phenomena. Ellie watched from the counter, her face a mix of worry and pride, like she'd known this was coming. By dawn, the posts were spreading, comments flooding in, people demanding answers. The truth was out, and Marcus felt a weight lift, even as the lake's secrets lingered. They left Willow Creek that morning, the box safely with Claire, who promised to keep digging. Sarah hugged Marcus and Jaden, her eyes wet but hopeful. "You gave me closure," she said. "Thank you." On the bus home, Marcus stared out the window, the lake fading into the distance. He thought about David and Lily, their laughter on the camera, their loss in the fog. He thought about the shape, still out there, watching. And he thought about Claire, who wasn't just a researcher but a survivor, carrying David's fight. The story wasn't over, the lake held more secrets, and the men on the boat might come looking, but Marcus had done what he'd been asked. He'd found the truth, and he'd shared it. Back home, Marcus kept Lily's notebook on his desk, a reminder of the kid who'd seen too much but left a mark. Jaden texted him links to news articles. Willow Creek was buzzing, investigators swarming the lake, the signals making headlines. But the final twist came a week later, in a new text from Claire. "Check the footage again." Lily's last frame. Marcus pulled up the camera footage online, his heart racing as he scrubbed to the end. There, in the shaky final seconds, was something he'd missed, a reflection in the water, not the shape, but a face. It was faint, blurry, but it looked like Claire, standing on the shore, watching David and Lily's boat. His breath caught. Had she been there that day? Was she part of the cover-up, or something else entirely? The lake kept its secrets, but Marcus knew one thing: the truth was never simple, and some mysteries followed you home.